Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. My name's Maddie and today I'm going to be doing a February and March wrap up. So if you haven't watched any of my other videos, I am finishing up paramedic school right now and I've been busy the last 2 months with clinicals, so my reading has been slim to none for the most part. In February I only read one book, and March I kind of picked it up a little, got back into the groove of things, so I decided to combine them because there was no point in me making a video to talk about one book that I don't have that much to say about. So I'm going to wrap them up together. What I did in January, I gave a bunch of statistics about how long I read and how many pages and whatever, and I kind of kept up with how long I read, but not like I did in January. So really all I can provide right now is like the average-ish about what I read every day of the month, and I'm gonna add up the page numbers that I read, but for the audiobooks I have no idea. I can just tell you how long I listened to them for. So my cat will probably be joining us for the video. So don't mind her. She likes to sleep in my bookshelf. I'm going to go ahead and put up a picture of like my time averages for the last few months. I've changed the colors since January just because it was ugly and I've been liking green for some reason. So obviously I'm going to put it up and it just kind of shows like block by block an average of what I read. This isn't like to the point or to the minute, but the dark green is times I did not read at all. So out of the month I didn't read 16 days, which for the most part I've been wanting to read like 15 days at least while I've been this busy, and so I've been close to that at least for March. In February I only read 4 days, so not even close. The longest that I listened to my audiobook that I read in February was about 3 hours, and then it kind of like teetered from there. Most of the time it was about 40 minutes to an hour of listening, because I would listen on my way to my clinicals, which was an hour or so, or listen on my way to work, which is about 40 minutes. So that's kind of how February went. And then in March I was a little more sporadic. There were days that I would read for over 4 hours and spend most of the day reading, and then there were days I only read for 10 minutes. But I feel like that's pretty normal for most people that have a busy lifestyle outside of this, so I'm not too mad about it. Obviously, I wish I read more in February, but we can't go back now, so it is what it is. The first book I'm going to talk about, or the only book that I read in February, was 9 Lives by Peter Swanson. This was a 7-hour audiobook and I listened for 5 hours and 18 minutes. I usually listen on 1.5 times speed. Sometimes I get up to 1.75 times speed once I get familiar with the narrator. So this book was a thriller and it follows 9 people who they all receive a letter with 9 names on it, including their own, and one by one they start being killed off. So you see from all 9 perspectives, you kind of get a little backstory on them, and then they just start getting murdered. And I would have never guessed the end. Like, it wasn't some huge really plot twist, I would say, but it was just unexpected, I guess. So I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it. I stuck with it the whole time. I was interested in the story. It was pretty good. I would say that overall it hit all the points that I'm looking for in a thriller, so I'm not mad about it. So the first book that I read in March is called The Wife Upstairs, and this follows a girl named Jane who is a dog walker in like an upper class neighborhood. And one day she meets this guy and she knows he's a widower, and they start to kind of establish a friendship. He ends up getting a dog for her to walk, and they end up getting into a relationship with each other. Stuff starts to get sketchy real quick. Like, it's a very you don't know who you're with, or you don't always know everything about everybody, no matter how close you are type of situation, because homie, he got secrets. So my really only critique of this book was that parts of it felt dry. Like, it felt really long. Like, there were some mundane things happening, which I get, that's part of the story, but it lost me in some points. And I was listening to it on audiobook, so it's already kind of hard to keep up with if I'm multitasking, but generally I got most of it. I listened to it, I think, while I was baking one day or something. But I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. The ending wasn't super surprising to me because it just wasn't, but anywho, it wasn't bad. I wouldn't not recommend it to somebody. It just like lost me a couple times, which also could have been because I listened to it on audio instead of reading it physically, but Either way, not the worst. The second book that I read in March was Gregor the Overlander, which if you've watched my Books from Elementary School video, I read it for that video. And it follows an 11-year-old named Gregor who falls down a grate in his laundry room after his sister and ends up in like the Underland, which is under New York City. While he's down there, he finds out that he is part of a prophecy that he has to fulfill to basically save his family. So it's really good. I would recommend it for children. It is a middle grade, so it was kind of harder to read as an adult, and I had the same problem with Harry Potter, which I talked about that in the other video as well, but I still enjoyed it. It was a good time. I listened to it on audiobook. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, and that was nothing against the story itself. It was just about my difficulty to kind of get into the story as an adult. But like I said, nothing against the story. It's written by Suzanne Collins, who also wrote The Hunger Games, so like she obviously knows what's going on, knows what's up, but overall I still really enjoyed it. Next, I fell into the trap of book talk and decided to read a book called Glitch. And what actually happened was I have like a playlist of saved videos on my TikTok called Book Recommendations, and I saw like a smutty book recommendation and I looked it up and it was the second book in a series. So I decided, since the first book was only like 160 pages, 150 pages, that I would just go ahead and read the first book. So the first book was Glitch, and it follows 2 people, Glitch and Aura, and they are online like gaming buddies, and both of them kind of secretly fantasize about each other but don't ever let the other person know. And one day Aura's computer breaks and Glitch fixes computers, so his friend kind of sets them up to where they have to meet in real life, and they kind of go on this like whirlwind romance, if you want to call it that. Like, it all happened over the course of 3 days, so it's hard to really call it a romance, but if you're into like really fast-paced smut, this is a story for you. I read it in a couple hours. I split it between like, I read part of it one night and then another part of it the next morning. I think I finished it on my 24-hour reading vlog that I posted when I read at work. Really, the only thing that gets me about the book, besides it being just a smidge cringy, is that there's no plot. Which obviously, if you're really, really deep into like some of the smut books, there's not going to be any plot. The plot is smut. But otherwise, it wasn't terrible. The sexy scenes were sexy, but the rest of it was just a little bit of a cringe fest. So I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Not the worst thing I've ever read, but definitely not the best thing I ever read. After that, I finally finished The Crown of Gilded Bones, which I have been reading since January because I read the first 2 From Blood and Ash books back to back, and then I started The Crown of Gilded Bones, had to stop one night, and then never picked it back up, or I just couldn't get back into it. So when I did my 24-hour reading vlog, I decided today's the day, we're gonna finish it, and I did. I'm glad I did because now I'm 1 book closer to the end of the series, and it is a series that I'm still enjoying, but I feel like this book was, and maybe it's just because it took me so long to read it, but I've seen it's kind of a general consensus that after the first From Blood and Ash book, like the next 2 are just fillers to get to the end of the book, and I didn't really feel that way about Kingdom of Flesh and Fire because I really enjoyed that one, but The Crown of Gilded Bones really kind of did drag on, and there was a lot of like, once again, just like mundane things going on before like shit got real. And just like the last book, it kind of waits till the 75% mark of the story to really like get into it. So once it did, it was great. It was just getting through the boring parts that was rough. So I still gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It's not my favorite of the series, but I still enjoyed the story. I can't really give a good synopsis of it because it would spoil like the first 2 books, but I would just recommend read the From Blood and Ash series and you'll be able to enjoy it just as much as the rest of us. And the last book that I listened to in March was The Maidens. I read The Silent Patient either last year or the year before when I first started getting into thrillers, and I really enjoyed it. This is written by the same author and ends up kind of tying into The Silent Patient at the end, which isn't really a spoiler because it doesn't really provide any information or pertain much to the story. It's just a small detail in my opinion. But The Maidens follows a lady named Miranda who is a group therapist, and one day her adoptive niece, like it's her niece but she is her caregiver, calls and tells her that her friend has been murdered. And so Miranda kind of takes it upon herself to go to the school and kind of try to like investigate what's going on. She has a friend that's also went through school with her that's now like an investigative journalist, so she kind of gets with him on a couple occasions to figure out what's going on. She meets some random stranger to figure out what's going on. It's this whole thing. I liked it. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. The ending was so surprising that I literally, while I was listening to the end of it, my mouth was on the floor. Like I just sat there like with my mouth open for a good 2 minutes, just shocked. It was really good. Once again, a little bit slow, but I'm starting to think that I really only have that issue when I listen to audiobooks, and it's probably because I feel like I'm listening to them for so long. But when I do listen to audiobooks, I really only listen over like one big chunk of time and a bunch of other little chunks of time. So when I listen for 6 hours straight, like it's gonna feel long and drawn out when I don't usually read for 6 hours straight. So that's that. All right, so adding it up, I listened to audiobooks for approximately 18 hours and 51 minutes throughout the month of March, and then I read approximately 575 pages in March. I lied about the glitch being 160 pages. It was 252 either way, but I think that I started reading The Crown of Gilded Bones halfway through, so I didn't have to like read the whole thing. Overall, I'm not disappointed with the books that I've read so far or over the last few months. It was a lot of like top tier reads for me. I think I'm pretty lenient when it comes to like actually rating things a 5-star, but like I kind of go off the idea of like, would I recommend it to someone else? If I do, it at least is a 4 or 5-star. Just because something gets a 3 doesn't mean that I won't, but I will specifically recommend books that are 4 and 5 stars. So that's really all I have to say this time around. Hopefully for the next few months, or at least from here on out, because I'm almost done with my clinicals, I will be able to update y'all every month because I'm actually reading, but no promises because I don't want to let y'all down. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any recommendations for video ideas or books to read, make sure to leave them down in the comments, and I will see y'all next time. Bye guys.